you everyone for joining. Really thank you wherever you are in the world. I know we've got people joining from across the world. I'm delighted to be joined by Martin Kerr, who is going to take us through all the information about ISO 55001 to 2024. But before I just hand over to Martin, I just wanted to let people know how we're going to handle questions. We've got a lot of people who've registered for the webinar, so we felt a good way to do the questions will be through Slido. So it's slido.com. I've put it in the chat, and I'll put the code up again, but it's 4665666, which is the Slido code. Please pop your questions in there, and you've got the opportunity to vote up questions as well. So we'll get, when we get to the questions part, Martin will be able to answer the most popular questions.
I hope.
Martin's very kindly joined us. I think you're in Australia at the moment, Martin.
I am indeed, just down in Sydney, Australia. Yes.
Yeah, I know you do a lot of travelling, so I was just checking where you were in the world. But anyway, I'm delighted that Martin's been able to join us. Obviously, it's his early evening, but we've got people joining us from across the world. Just so you're aware, we are recording the session, so if there's anything you want to go back to, you'll be able to see the session again. And also, Martin's very kindly agreed to give us a copy of his slides, and we'll PDF those, and we'll make those available in the same place as the recording. So thank you for that, Martin. So I'm going to hand over to Martin now. We will be doing questions a bit later, so please do remember to pop your questions into Slido, and I'll catch up with you a bit later on when we're in the questions session. Thank you.
Look, thank you so much, Ursula. Great to see you again. And again, it's a real privilege to share some of the insights that I was witness to and, of course, managed throughout my life as convener of ISO 55001. I originally joined the ISO committee in 2017. And in 2021, when we kicked off in May, I was quite privileged to be able to lead a group of great people throughout the journey, if you like, over this 3 years. Today, I'm going to walk you through a bit of background, some of the insights, some of the things you may or may not know about an international standard. I don't want to make this a super dry topic. I'm not going to dive straight into detail. So the first part will just be setting the scene, giving you some insights. Then I'm going to talk I've got a slide for the high level changes for ISO. And then I'm going to delve into pretty much a slide per section into that detail. As Ursula said before, I will be sharing this back with the IAM afterwards. And again, looking forward to seeing what questions we may get from the panel themselves. So TC251, it's called a technical committee. Up until 2014, it was a PC, which stands for a project committee. When the ISO was first launched in early 2014, it then became a technical committee supporting it. As you can see there in the structure, I know you've got Tom Goodyear and Budwin addressing a webinar next week, and we'll talk more broadly around this. And I know you've got Shiv talking about data at a point in time as well. But as you can see across the bottom line there are different what we call working groups. I have had the privilege and sometimes pleasure, sometimes not, working across different ones, but it really enabled me as convener of O1 to have a balanced view about what we're setting out to do. And I'll share with you some of those insights again and the guiding principles that we undertook. I do want to just reach out and thank two people in particular over the last 3 years. One of them is Dick Hortensius. So Dick, I would say very much my 2IC throughout the life of the O1 project. He's also on the JTCG, which looks at the structure of this standard and all the management system standards around the world, and he was just a great help. I'd also like to acknowledge Anne-Marie Kin. She started off as a 2IC, if you like, for O1, but then she really stepped up to a huge role, and some of you I know in the IAM who attended TC251 will know that some of the challenges that she undertook, and of course got there at the end. I'd also like to thank the theme leads and the sub-themes, and I'll share more detail about what that actually means. But to give you an idea of across 3 years, we had over 100 meetings in various time zones with various people and various topics. And it was a big undertaking. I've got a very supporting family, and I know that those who led these teams, and you know some of them as well, including the likes of John and Neville, etc. Just setting the scene, when we undertake any ISO meeting, it's quite strict in terms of the code of conduct. I'm not going to read this out, but it's very much around, we are here for the betterment of the standard itself. Self-interest is not welcome, but of course it can be a welcome challenge sometimes when you're trying to get a point across. We need to actually align with the other management system standards in terms of what they call the harmonized structure. I'll get to that momentarily. But as you can see, at the end of the day, it is a strict process. It is an interesting organization, having everyone is a volunteer, but at the end of the day, we are providing a product for the globe in terms of the management system for asset management, or an AMS. The project timeline, and this is another interesting thing and quite rigorous in ISO. The maximum term that you can spend reviewing and revising a standard really is 3 years. Now, a bit of insight, the standard originally was, the first version went out in 2014. The reason why, and typically every 5 years there is a review cycle for an international standard, especially in MSS. And it wasn't due to COVID, it was actually due to the delay in the start of the review of 55001, was due to what was referred to as the high level structure of ISO, moving to what they call harmonized structure. And I'll get into the detail of that at the latter part of this pack. But that aside, we had a starting point in May of 2021. And from that point, we actually went through those 3 years. As you can see, just some screenshots here. We were always looking at the vertical line. Where were we? At sometimes we felt as a group, and that's across all working groups, we'll never get this done. There's too much work to do. There's conflicting. But what we did find that worked for us was, in the time of COVID and working virtually, in some respects, we got a lot of work done at a shorter amount of time. But as we learned when we got to the end of the process and the final 2 face-to-face meetings, it's really when the conversation comes to light and you can really challenge some of those norms. In any standard that's undertaken by ISO, it's recommended that you come up with what's called a design spec, or a design specification. What that looks at is, as the name suggests, you're going from 2014 to 2024 as a version. But what does that actually mean? There are certain constraints in terms of the editorial and the structure of a management system standard, but we also had to accommodate some of the ideas that came through Amersfoort, which is in the Netherlands, in 2018, Nanjing in China from 2019, and then Peru in 2019. So all these face-to-face meetings led to the ingredients, if you like, for some of the ideas. But what I wanted to do in this case was understanding, especially when we're in the middle of COVID, I really wanted to put out there a team charter, and the team charter was agreed, and it evolved over a few different versions. And I think it actually set the scene for how we work together. Because across those 3 years, we really went through a creation phase, a collaborative phase, and then finally a consensus phase. And my biggest learning out of leading as convener is, if you start with consensus, people won't come with you on the journey. You do need to allow ideas to be fleshed out and how they make their way in. So again, what you're looking at there is simply that, the design specification that was signed off and agreed with TC251, and of course the charter in which Workgroup 6 developed. What you're looking at here, left to right, are all the inputs, if you like, to the consideration for 01, but also the consideration for 00. It's fair to say that 00 is, of course, the umbrella artifact that sits across all the standards. It's very much the why are we doing this, versus the 01 is the structure, the assurance of how you will actually go, or what you put in place to do that in terms of that decision making. But as you can see down the left-hand side, there were pre-existing registers of ideas, In the ISO committee, we have a thing called a NWI